Hi, dears. Put your tasks aside for a minute. I want to tell a story that might help you see your loved ones in a new light. Tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the listening. October turned out cold. The dampness seeped everywhere, slipping under my jacket, forcing me to bundle up in an old wool scarf. I was coming back from the farmer's market where I'd bought the last apples of the season for jam. My old Honda CR-V, faithful for 15 years, was growling on the rutted dirt road. In the gray twilight of an autumn evening the road was barely visible, but I knew every pothole, every bend. These places had been my home all my life. I'm Rachel Winters, widow, mother, grandmother. Folks around the county know me. I worked as a nurse at the rural hospital and retired 5 years ago. Now I tend the garden, bake pies for the grandkids, and make jam for the winter. An ordinary life for an ordinary woman, though people rarely called me ordinary. With my black hair, almost untouched by gray at 56, my darker skin and almond-shaped brown eyes, I always stood out around here. Mexican blood, people murmured behind my back. Sometimes with admiration, more often with a wary note. And they weren't entirely wrong. My grandmother was from Mexico City. She married an American, my grandfather, against her family's wishes. That story passed down through our family like a legend of great love that beat prejudice. My phone in my jacket pocket burst into a sharp trill and made me jump. An old flip phone. Reliable, with a battery that never failed even in the worst freezes. An unknown number lit up the screen. Hello, I pressed the handset to my ear, slowing down over an especially bumpy stretch. Rachel Winters? A man's voice, unfamiliar, out of breath. Yes, that's me. You have to come. Now. The tree line by the old quarry, you know it? Who is this? My heart skipped. Stephen. I hunt out past the river. I found your daughter. She's bad, real bad. She has ID on her and your number is listed as an emergency contact. The ground dropped out from under me. I slammed the brakes. The car fishtailed on the wet clay. What's wrong with her? What happened? She's been beaten badly, conscious but barely talking. I called an ambulance, but it'll take them a while to get here. You better hurry. I spun the Honda around in the middle of the road, nearly sliding into the ditch. My hands trembled, but my head was clear. The old quarry, about 12 miles north, down a forest track. The only thought running through my mind, Ashley, my girl, hang on. My daughter is 32. Pretty, smart, stubborn. At 24 she married Gregory, the heir to a big construction company. She moved to the city into a fancy mansion. She called rarely and visited even less. Whenever I asked about her life she dodged the questions. Everything's fine, Mom, don't worry. And I pretended to believe her, though a mother's instinct told me things weren't smooth in her gilded cage. The road to the quarry wound between thinning oaks and maples. The car jolted over ruts. I fought the wheel but didn't slow down. Thoughts raced. Who could have beaten Ashley? A robbery? Or no, that couldn't be. Gregory always seemed calm, polite. His mother, Patricia, though, she looked at me like I was nothing, like our Mexican roots were some stain on her precious son. Around the bend I saw the old quarry, an abandoned sand pit sprouting young pines. A beaten-up pickup sat on the shoulder with its doors open. A man in his 40s in a camouflage jacket paced nearby. I hit the brakes, jumped out forgetting to turn off the engine. Where is she? My voice cracked. Over there, he gestured toward the tree line. About 100 meters. I put my jacket under her and left a thermos with tea. I wanted to carry her but I was afraid, maybe broken bones. I ran in the direction he'd pointed. My feet sank in the soggy ground from the rain, branches slapped my face. I stumbled, fell, got up, ran on. Something pale showed between the trees. At first I didn't recognize her. Hair matted with blood and dirt, her face swollen, a huge bruise under one eye. Her designer coat was torn and filthy. She lay on her side, curled up like she used to when she was sick as a child. Ashley. I dropped to my knees beside her, afraid to touch. She opened her eyes a little. One was almost closed, the other glassy and unfocused. Her lips trembled in a weak smile that immediately turned into a grimace. Mom. I'm here, sweetheart, I'm here. I stroked her head gently, avoiding obvious injuries. The ambulance is on the way. Hold on, baby. She tried to sit up and groaned. I noticed one arm awkwardly twisted, a fracture, no doubt. Who did this? My voice hardened without me meaning to. She licked her busted lips and coughed. I handed her a sip from the hunter's thermos. The warm tea seemed to give her a little strength. Patricia, she whispered so faint I almost missed it. Your mother-in-law? I couldn't believe my ears. Ashley nodded, wincing. She said my dirty Mexican blood a shame on their family. Something inside me snapped. A rage I'd never known flooded me. I knew Patricia despised us. But to beat a defenseless woman, her own daughter-in-law. Ash, she gripped my hand. Don't go to the hospital. They've got people everywhere. Home. What are you saying, baby? You need medical help. No, panic flashed in her eyes. He'll cover for her. Gregory is always on her side. I froze. Her husband wouldn't protect her from his own mother. But that was insane. Or, I thought of my grandfather, my mother's father, Nicholas, a former military intelligence man with an iron will and a piercing stare. He used to say, Rachel, if something seems crazy, look for what's hidden beneath the surface. At that moment the distant wail of a siren cut through the trees. The ambulance. I had to decide fast. What happened, Ash? Why would she do this? My daughter swallowed, wincing from the pain. I found documents. In Gregory's safe. She's stealing money from the charity, millions. From sick kids. Each word cost her. I asked her about it. She went pale. Then she said we should go out of town, she'd show me a new plot. Said she'd explain everything. The picture started to form. Ashley must have stumbled on something incriminating, probably by accident. Patricia, head of a large charity, a respected lady in town, decided to get rid of an inconvenient witness. By whose hands? Hired goons? Or her own? Her, Ashley whispered as if reading my thoughts. She drove me out here. In her SUV. Said no one would believe me anyway. With my dirty blood. The siren was getting closer. The medics would be here soon. The right thing would be to send my daughter to the hospital, call the police, file a report. But if Gregory's family really had connections, if he sided with his mother, they could make Ashley shut up. For good. The decision clicked into place like a switch. Did the hunter see who brought you here? I asked. No. She left. Thought I'd die here. From the cold and the wounds. I stood up and ran back toward the road. The hunter was still there, smoking and leaning on his truck. Stephen, right? I went up to him. Did you see who brought her? No, he shook his head. I was out hunting, came across her by accident. It was getting dark. Listen, I spoke fast, afraid the ambulance would arrive before I could explain. My daughter is in danger. This is a family matter. I'll take her home and treat her myself. I'm a medic. He frowned, looking at me skeptically. Ma'am, she needs serious care. She may have internal injuries. I know, I lowered my voice. Her mother-in-law did this. She's got people everywhere, even in the hospital. If Ashley goes in there, they'll shut her up. Or worse. His eyes widened in surprise, then a look of understanding washed over them. You want me to tell the medics the call was a mistake, that you were wrong, and I'll take her. He stared at me for a long moment, then nodded. I feel like you're not lying. But if she gets worse. I've been a nurse for 30 years, I repeated, and I'm her mother. He nodded again and began to brush off his jacket. Go to your daughter. I'll deal with the ambulance. I squeezed his hand in silent thanks and ran back to Ashley. The siren wail grew louder. Come on, baby, I helped her sit up gently. We'll get to the car now. And the ambulance? She held her head with difficulty. I canceled the call, I lied. We'll manage ourselves. She didn't argue. I helped her to her feet and slung her uninjured arm over my shoulder. Ashley moaned but moved, leaning on me. We walked back to the road, skirting where the hunter waited. Through the trees I could already see the ambulance lights flickering. We reached my Honda. I helped her into the passenger seat and buckled the seatbelt, trying not to jostle her injured arm. I went around to the driver's side, got in, and eased us away. I didn't turn on the headlights until we were a safe distance from the quarry. There, I said once we were back on a somewhat decent dirt road. Now home. Ashley closed her eyes and leaned back. In the dim glow of the dashboard her face looked ashen. Mom, they won't stop, she whispered. I know too much now. We'll come up with something. I forced my voice to sound steady though I trembled inside with fear and rage. The main thing is you're alive. Ashley gripped my hand, making me briefly loosen my hold on the wheel. Mom, I have proof, she said, suddenly firm. Documents. I managed to photograph them on my phone before we left. My heart leapt. Where's the phone? In my bag. She didn't take it. Guess she decided it would look like a robbery. I nodded. My thoughts sharpened into cold clarity. We had to hide Ashley where no one would look, dress her wounds, and reach someone who could help deal with this. One figure rose up in my memory at once, Maxwell, my older brother. A former serviceman like our grandfather. Stern, laconic, rock solid. He lived in the next county, worked for a private security firm, and unlike me had kept the skills our grandfather taught us. Ashley, I turned to my daughter. You have to tell me everything. From the start. But first we'll contact Uncle Maxwell. You remember him? She nodded weakly. The one who taught me to shoot a slingshot. That's him. I tried to smile. He'll help us. We drove through the dark down empty country roads. Ahead was my house, wooden and old, but sturdy. Upstairs in the attic, under a layer of dust, sat a trunk Maxwell and I had hauled back after Grandpa died. A trunk with things that might be far more useful than I'd ever thought. Without slowing, I pulled out my phone and texted my brother, Maxwell, I need your help. Remember what Grandpa Nicholas taught us? We need that now. We reached my place on the edge of town as the night took hold. Stars spilled across the sky, cold, bright. The October air smelled of fallen leaves and the first frost. The old log house greeted us with quiet. I helped Ashley out of the car, nearly carrying her up the steps. She barely put her feet down but kept her composure. Always strong, my girl. As a child she'd get up silently after falling off her bike, wipe her knees, and ride on. But now even she was worn thin. Just a minute, sweetheart. I sat her on the living room sofa and rushed to the stove. The house was cold. I'd left that morning and hadn't had a chance to light a fire. I quickly coaxed the stove to life with kindling and birch logs I'd prepared earlier. Soon the flames crackled, casting a warm glow over her pale face. Let's take a look at your wounds, I said, switching on the lamp. Under the bright light Ashley looked worse. The bruise under her eye was swelling black, her lip split, a deep scratch ran down her cheek. I carefully helped her out of her coat. Each movement made her wince. Under the thin blouse bruises showed. Her right arm hung limp. Broken, I said, feeling for the wrist. Probably a simple fracture, no displacement. We need to immobilize it. My first aid kit had everything we needed. 30 years as a nurse hadn't been for nothing. I cleaned the visible wounds with antiseptic, wrapped her wrist in a splint, gave her painkillers and an anti-inflammatory. Thanks, Mom, Ashley whispered when I finished. You always know what to do. I smiled bitterly. Know what to do? My only daughter lay before me battered and broken. And the enemy wasn't some street thug but an influential mother-in-law with powerful connections. What could I do against her money and influence? The phone, I remembered. You said there was proof. Ashley pointed to her bag, an expensive leather one with gold hardware. Inside I found the latest model iPhone in a cracked case. The screen, thankfully, was intact. Code 1989, Ashley said. The year you moved into this house. I unlocked the phone, noting involuntarily that she'd chosen a date meaningful to both of us for the passcode. Despite the fancy life in her husband's mansion, she hadn't forgotten her roots. In the gallery, she hinted, a folder called Documents for Gregory. I found the folder. Dozens of photos of accounting reports, payment orders, contracts. At first glance, ordinary business papers. But I could see why Ashley had found something important in them, something that made Patricia take such a risk. Explain what's here, I asked, sitting down beside my daughter. Hope Foundation, Ashley began quietly. Patricia is its director and founder. Every year tens of millions of dollars pass through the foundation. For sick kids treatment, for care homes, for building playgrounds. Everything appears official, transparent. She paused to sip from the cup of water I handed her. 2 weeks ago Gregory asked me to help with documents for the foundation's annual report. He's on the board, but honestly, he never really dove into it. He just signed where his mother told him. I nodded. That sounded like Gregory, handsome, charming, but utterly spineless, living his life under his mother's thumb. I started going through the papers and noticed something odd. Large sums, from $5 to $15 million, were regularly transferred to companies with names like Consulting Plus or Business Analytics. For consulting, legal support, analytics. But there were no detailed reports on those services. And when I looked up the companies, one-day firms, I guessed, set up to launder money. Exactly, Ashley nodded. I checked the databases. They were all registered shortly before receiving money from the foundation. The founders were people with lost passports, dead people, or people who had no idea they were involved. Classic shell entities. And the money? The money went to offshore accounts. You asked your mother-in-law about it? I shook my head. Ashley, did you not realize how dangerous this was? I did. She gave a faint smile through her split lips. But I wanted to give her a chance to explain. I'm family, after all. I thought maybe there was a reasonable explanation. I sighed. My naive, kind girl, always believing the best in people even when the evidence says otherwise. And what did she say? Nothing, Ashley grimaced. At first she turned pale, then collected herself. She said I'd misunderstood, that it was a complex tax optimization scheme. Completely legal. Then she suggested we drive out of town. Said she'd explain everything privately, without any extra ears. And you went? Yes, she lowered her eyes. Stupid, right? But I thought she is my husband's mother. The grandmother of my future child. I froze. You. Ashley nodded and covered her belly with her uninjured hand. 12 weeks. We hadn't told anyone yet. We wanted to wait until the second trimester. Gregory was so happy. My heart clenched with pain and rage. Patricia had beaten a pregnant woman, her daughter-in-law carrying her grandchild. All over money. Did she know about the baby? Yes, Ashley swallowed. I told her in the car. I thought that would stop her. But she laughed. Said with my dirty Mexican blood I have no place in their family. That my baby would ruin their flawless pedigree. I closed my eyes to hold back tears of fury. My own grandmother, despite her background, was an educated woman, spoke 5 languages, played the violin. And this arrogant snob. She stopped the car near the woods. Ashley continued in a low voice. Said she wanted to show the plot they were buying. We got out. And then I didn't even have time to understand what was happening. She hit me with something heavy, I think a pry bar from the trunk. After that, she trembled as she remembered. She went crazy, kept repeating things about Mexican blood, about me wanting to ruin their family, shame them, take their money. I hugged my daughter, careful not to touch the injured spots. She buried her face in my shoulder and sobbed silently. She would have killed me if not for a phone call, Ashley whispered. Someone called her. She got distracted, started saying she was on her way, that everything was fine. Then she just got in the car and left. Left me to die from the cold and my wounds. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A message from my brother, leaving now. We'll be there by morning. Don't call anyone. Turn off your phones. They can track them. Relief washed over me. Maxwell was always the steady backup. If anyone knew what to do in a situation like this, it was him. You need to switch off your phone, I told Ashley. And mine too. In the car, she suddenly remembered. Under the seat. Gregory insisted on getting your Honda serviced at their shop 3 months ago. They could have. I understood immediately. A tracker. They'd been watching me all along. Wait here. I stood and went for the door. Outside the air had grown even colder. The stars seemed sharper against the moonless sky. I crouched by the car and shone my flashlight under the driver's side. Sure enough, a small black box was bolted to the frame beneath the seat. I ripped it off and examined it, a professional GPS tracker. Back inside, I put the device on the table. You were right, I told my daughter. They were tracking me. They know where you live. Ashley tried to sit up straighter but winced. We have to get out of here. I shook my head. No, that would be logical, but that's what they expect. We'll stay. Maxwell's coming, and we'll decide what to do. I pulled the battery from Ashley's phone, then switched off my own. We could no longer be traced. And for now, I walked to the old dresser and slid out the bottom drawer. We'll need this. From under a pile of old sweaters, I took out a worn holster with a pistol. My grandfather's Colt M1911, an heirloom he'd registered back in the 80s. I kept my permit current, though I hadn't drawn the gun once in all these years. You know how? Ashley's eyes opened wide. Yes, I checked the magazine and the safety. Grandpa taught me, and Maxwell helped me brush up a couple of years ago. I set the gun on the table beside the tracker, 2 symbols of where we stood now. We were the hunted, but the kind that could fight back. Ashley leaned against the pillows I tucked behind her back. Her face was worn and pale, but there was something new in her eyes. Not just fear, resolve. We need a plan, she said. I've got the documents, but that's not enough. They can deny everything. Say I forged them or misread them. Maxwell will help, I said, sitting next to her. He knows people with access to databases. If we can trace the money trail. It's not that simple, Ashley shook her head. The scheme is complex, shell companies, offshore accounts. It'll take time and resources we don't have. Then we'll have to play it differently, I said, staring out the window. Outside, the darkness had thickened, almost tangible. Somewhere out there, 200 kilometers away, in a mansion by the river, sat the woman who tried to kill my daughter. The woman who despised us for our Mexican blood, who believed she could get away with anything because of money and connections. Tell me everything you know about Patricia, I said. Her habits, fears, weaknesses. Why? Ashley flinched. You're not planning to. No, I shook my head. We won't stoop to her level. but we need to understand who we're up against. Ashley studied me for a moment, then nodded. She's terrified of exposure, more than anything, she began. Her reputation is her religion. The charity work, the glossy interviews, the social projects, all of it's her image. The perfect philanthropist. But underneath, what about her husband? Your father-in-law? Robert. Ashley gave a bitter smile. Big businessman, head of a holding company. In public, a model husband and father. In reality, he lives separately, has a mistress younger than me, and never interferes in Patricia's affairs as long as she doesn't mess with his business. And Gregory? Your husband? Ashley's face twisted in pain, and I knew it wasn't physical. Mom, he loves me, he does. But he'll always side with her. He's tied to her by an umbilical cord no one ever cut. He's 40, and he still calls her to ask which tie to wear to meetings. I squeezed her good hand. That's why you don't want to go back. Yes, she lowered her eyes. If I end up in the hospital, Gregory will take me home. And there Patricia will finish what she started. No one will stop her. A heavy sigh escaped me. My girl was trapped in a gilded cage she couldn't escape. We need to reach someone Patricia can't silence, I said aloud. Someone she fears or can't control. Ashley thought for a moment, then her eyes widened. Robert, she whispered. Her husband. She can do whatever she wants as long as it doesn't hurt the business. But if a scandal about the foundation goes public, it'll damage the holding's reputation. Then he'll step in, I finished. Yes, Ashley nodded. He's not a good man, but he's pragmatic. And if it's between his wife and his business, he'll choose business, I said. Good thinking. But how do we reach him? I'm sure he's surrounded by guards and secretaries. I have his personal number. Ashley managed a faint smile. Gregory called him once in front of me. I memorized it. Never thought it would come in handy. I nodded. The plan was starting to take shape. But first we wait for Maxwell. I checked the clock. He's still about 6 hours out. You need rest. I helped her lie back more comfortably and adjusted the pillows. Her eyelids were already heavy. The painkillers and exhaustion were taking over. Mom, she caught my hand as I turned to leave. Thank you. For what, sweetheart? For not asking why I married such a weak man, she said with a bitter smile. For not saying I told you so. I leaned down and kissed her forehead. We all make mistakes, baby. The important thing is to fix them before it's too late. When she finally drifted off, I stepped out onto the porch. The night was cold and clear. The stars, bright and unfeeling, watched from above. Somewhere in the distance, a dog howled. I breathed in the frosty air deeply. I thought of my grandmother, dark-eyed Carmen, who'd run away from Mexico City with an American against her family's will. Her pride and strength had passed to my mother, then to me. The same Mexican blood Patricia so despised. Tonight, that blood boiled, and it would not rest until justice was done. Not out of revenge, but to protect my daughter and her unborn child. The tracker I'd removed from the car still blinked faintly, a tiny red light pulsing. I placed it on a tree stump by the house. Let them think I was still here. Let them come. I'd be ready. Maxwell arrived at dawn. His old Jeep Cherokee rolled up quietly just as the sky in the east began to lighten. He stepped out, tall, lean, close-cropped hair, the sharp, alert eyes of a scout. Rachel, he gave me a quick hug. Where is she? Inside. Sleeping. We went into the house. Maxwell examined Ashley carefully without waking her. His face stayed unreadable, but I saw his jaw tighten at the sight of her bruises and swollen face. Tell me everything, he said when we sat in the kitchen. And I did. Everything. About the documents, Patricia, the beating, the pregnancy, the fact that Ashley's husband wouldn't defend her. Maxwell listened silently, nodding occasionally. When I finished, he poured himself some coffee and sat across from me. It's serious, he said, but not hopeless. Do we have evidence? I showed him Ashley's phone with the photos of the documents. He studied them for a long time, zooming in on details. Impressive, he finally said. Classic money laundering through a charity. But it's not enough for court. We'll need more proof. How do we get it? I have people, Maxwell said with a faint, knowing smile. Old comrades. Some of them work in places with access to financial databases. For the right price, they can help. At that moment Ashley appeared in the doorway. She looked even worse than yesterday, bruises blackened, her face swollen. Uncle Maxwell, she rasped. He stood and hugged her gently. Holding up, soldier? She managed a faint smile. I'm trying. And the baby? She instinctively covered her stomach with her hand. Seems okay. No bleeding, no severe lower abdominal pain. But a doctor needs to check. Maxwell exchanged a look with me. We both understood how risky it was to go to the local hospital, but we couldn't leave Ashley without medical care either. I know a doctor in Pineville, Maxwell said. Former Army medic. Trustworthy. He'll come here. We won't have to go anywhere. Thank you, Ashley whispered, then tensed. The phone. They could be tapping your calls. Don't worry, Maxwell showed her new phones. We'll use only these. And I'll call the doctor from a payphone in Meadowbrook. He stepped to the window and lifted the edge of the curtain. We can't stay here, he said, squinting into the dawn. The house is too exposed. The woods press right up on the north side, perfect for surveillance and an attack. But where can we go? I looked around the room, at a loss. We can't go to a motel, IDs. If we go to friends, we'd put them at risk. Grandpa had a hunting cabin, Maxwell said thoughtfully. About 20 kilometers from here, deep in the woods. Remember? I nodded. A small log cabin on a forest lake where Grandpa used to take us fishing. I hadn't been there in 15 years, but I remembered the place well. You can only reach it on foot or by off-road, Maxwell went on. No real roads, just trails. Ideal hideout. But Ashley, she can't hike. We'll take your Honda, he decided. We'll leave the tracker here in case they're pinging the car by satellite. And we'll head out at dusk so we're harder to spot. I agreed. Risky, but logical. The cabin was far from civilization. No one would think to look for us there. What about the evidence? Ashley asked. The Foundation's documents? Maxwell sat beside her and studied the photos on the phone carefully. Impressive, he admitted. But you're right, it's not enough. We need corroboration from independent sources. Bank statements, corporate registry data, proof those shell companies are fake. Do you have access to that? Ashley asked hopefully. Maxwell gave a cryptic smile. Not me, but I know people who do. Old comrades who now work in places with access to those databases. For a price, they can help. How much? I was already calculating what savings I had tucked away. Don't worry about money, Maxwell waved it off. I've got savings. Consider it an investment in our family's future. He pulled a laptop from his bag and powered it on. Air-gapped, he explained. Doesn't connect to the internet directly. Safe. While Maxwell worked, I tended to Ashley, helped her wash up, changed her bandages, made a light breakfast. Her condition was stable, but the bruises had turned that awful purple-green. Looking at my daughter's battered face physically hurt. Mom, she said softly when we were alone in the kitchen. I'm scared. I know, honey, I hugged her gently. But we'll handle it. We always have. Not for me, she shook her head. For the baby. And for you. Patricia, she won't stop. She stands to lose too much if the truth gets out. Which is exactly why we have to act fast. I squeezed her hand. And decisively. Maxwell worked all day, calling, writing, analyzing. Twice he slipped out to use a payphone. He came back with news. The doctor will come tomorrow morning, he reported. And meanwhile, we've got something interesting. He spread out some printouts he'd brought. The Hope Foundation has existed for 7 years, he began. In that time, roughly $300 million have flowed through it, most from large corporations lowering their taxable base. On paper, it's all legal, money to charity, companies get tax breaks and a shiny image. But in reality? I asked. In reality, about 60% of the funds vanish into thin air, Maxwell said, pointing at a diagram he'd sketched. Shell firms, fake contracts, padded estimates, classic laundering. And no one noticed for 7 years? I couldn't believe it. Someone did, Maxwell said darkly. 2 years ago a journalist started digging. A month later, car crash. Barely survived, but he's paralyzed now. The investigation, of course, died. Ashley went even paler. I didn't know. How would you? Maxwell shrugged. No papers ran it. This came from personal sources. So what now? I asked. Take this to the police? Maxwell shook his head. Pointless. The family's influence is too big. The report will get lost. Evidence will disappear. And you'll be in even greater danger. Then what? My patience was fraying. The plan stays the same, Maxwell said firmly. We go straight to Robert. But now we've got stronger cards to play. He tapped the laptop screen. My friends dug up something else. Besides the foundation, Patricia has accounts in foreign banks. The amounts are substantial, around 2 million euros. The source looks dubious. Does her husband know? Ashley asked. Apparently not, Maxwell said, shaking his head. The accounts are under Patricia's maiden name. Very carefully concealed. But my guys found them. So she's not just stealing from the foundation, I said thoughtfully. She's also hiding money from her husband. Preparing a backup escape route? Looks that way, Maxwell agreed. And that could be the deciding factor. Robert might overlook the foundation scheme. After all, it's donor money, not his. But personal betrayal. He won't forgive that. Ashley finished for him. He's old school. To him, family is first and foremost a business partnership. Loyalty above all. Evening was falling. We were getting ready to leave. Maxwell checked the car and made sure the tracker was still securely attached to the tree stump by the house. I packed only what we needed most: warm clothes, medicine, food. Ashley was quiet and focused. It's time, Maxwell said once it was dark outside. I'll drive. You two in the back seat. Stay low when we pass through town. We stepped out of the house. The air was cold, smelling of pine sap and the coming snow. I helped Ashley into the car and covered her with a blanket. Maxwell checked the gun I'd given him and tucked it under his jacket. Everything's going to be fine, he said, starting the engine. Grandpa didn't teach us survival for nothing. The Honda rolled forward quietly. We didn't turn on the headlights until we hit the forest road. I looked back at the house that had been my refuge for so many years. Now it looked small, lonely, and vulnerable. A few miles down the road, the low thrum of helicopter blades reached us. Maxwell instantly veered off and killed the engine. Down, he ordered. We froze, listening. The helicopter drew closer, its searchlight sweeping the treetops. They were looking for us. They wouldn't use a helicopter, Ashley whispered. Too obvious. Probably Coast Guard or police. Maxwell nodded but stayed tense. The helicopter passed a couple of miles away and disappeared beyond the horizon. Let's move, he said, restarting the car. The hardest part's ahead. The road grew worse. The Honda jolted over roots and rocks, plunging deeper into the forest. Ashley winced with every bump but didn't complain. Almost there, Maxwell kept saying. Just a bit more. After an hour of rough driving, a dark silhouette emerged against the night sky, the old hunting cabin, perched on the edge of a black, glass-still forest lake. We're here, Maxwell exhaled, cutting the engine. I helped Ashley out of the car. She stood, leaning on me, taking deep breaths of the cold night air. So quiet, she whispered. No city sounds at all. We'll be safe here, Maxwell said, unlocking the cabin's creaky door. At least until we're ready to strike. Inside smelled of damp wood and years of disuse. Maxwell lit the kerosene lamp he'd brought. The flickering light revealed a simple interior, a wooden table, a couple of benches, an iron stove, and narrow bunks along the wall. Not the Ritz-Carlton, Maxwell smirked. But it'll do for us. I helped Ashley sit on a bench and draped my jacket over her shoulders. She looked exhausted, but there was determination in her eyes. What now? She asked. Maxwell began unpacking supplies. Tomorrow morning the doctor will come. He'll check you and the baby. In the meantime, I'll set up our meeting with Robert. How will you get him to meet us? I asked. People like that don't take appointments from strangers. Maxwell smiled faintly. I've got a plan he won't be able to ignore. He pulled a small satellite phone from his bag. Tomorrow we'll send him a message with photos of the documents and a proposal to meet. Trust me, he'll agree. I looked at my brother in admiration. Grandpa would have been proud of him, of both of us. We hadn't broken. We hadn't given up. We were acting, just like he taught us, calm, methodical, every step planned. Maxwell started the stove. Soon the cabin filled with warmth. I helped Ashley lie down on one of the bunks, covered her with a blanket, and gave her pain medication. Sleep, I whispered, stroking her hair. Tomorrow will be a hard day. When she drifted off, Maxwell and I sat by the stove, watching the fire through the slits in the iron door. You realize what we're doing? I asked quietly. We're taking on one of the most powerful families in the county. They've got money, connections, influence. And we. The truth, Maxwell said simply. And determination. That might not be enough, I murmured. And we've got something else they don't, he added, tossing another log onto the fire. That Mexican blood she mocked so much. I smiled, remembering Grandma, her pride, her resilience, her way of surviving where others gave up. You know, Maxwell said thoughtfully, I don't think it's a coincidence Grandpa married a Mexican woman. He was an intelligence man, part of the system, but he chose someone from a people who've survived for centuries outside of rules, who always found a way through when others hit walls. You think that blood really means something? I asked. I think we're the product of both worlds, he said. We have Grandpa's discipline, his methodical mind, and Grandma's intuition, her way of seeing what others miss. The fire crackled softly, throwing flickering shadows across the cabin walls. We sat in silence, each lost in thought. Tomorrow would be decisive. We should get some rest, Maxwell finally said. We'll need all our strength. I nodded and moved to the bunk where Ashley slept. I couldn't leave her alone, not even for a minute. I'll take first watch, Maxwell said, pulling out the pistol. He sat by the window, eyes scanning the darkness outside. His profile, sharp and steady, reminded me so much of Grandpa. The same straight nose, the same furrow between the brows. I lay down beside my daughter, listening to her uneven breathing. She slept fitfully, sometimes twitching or softly moaning. It's going to be all right, I promised her silently. We'll protect you and the baby, whatever it takes. With that thought, I slipped into a restless sleep, one where I kept finding my daughter again and again, beaten and bloodied, lying in the cold forest clearing. A soft knock at the door woke me. I jumped up, instinctively grabbing the pistol lying beside me. Maxwell was already at the entrance, tense, ready to act. "Who is it?" he asked quietly. "Dr. Harrison," came a calm male voice. Maxwell called me. My brother relaxed slightly but kept the gun ready. "Which unit, Victor?" 82nd Airborne, the voice answered instantly. "Operation code name, Grey Wolf." Maxwell nodded and opened the door. Standing there was a stocky man in his 50s, wearing a camouflage jacket and holding a worn medical kit. His short gray hair and lined face spoke of someone who'd seen too much in life. "Come in, Victor," Maxwell shook his hand. "Thanks for coming." "For you, anytime," the doctor said, stepping inside and scanning the room. His eyes stopped on the sleeping figure of Ashley. "This the patient?" I nodded and gently woke my daughter. "Ashley, this is the doctor. He's going to check on you." Victor was brisk and professional. He examined each wound carefully, checked her pupils, blood pressure, and pulse. Then he pulled out a small portable ultrasound device from his kit. "Army issue," he explained when he saw my surprised look. "Field-grade equipment. Not as precise as in hospitals, but it'll show what matters." He ran the probe carefully across Ashley's stomach, studying the small screen. His expression stayed focused, and I waited for his verdict with my heart in my throat. "There's a heartbeat," he finally said. "Strong and steady. Placenta intact. You're lucky, young lady." Ashley burst into quiet tears of relief. I squeezed her hand. "What about the rest of her injuries?" Maxwell asked. "Fractured wrist, no displacement." Victor double-checked the splint I'd applied. "You did good work. Moderate concussion. Bruises, contusions, abrasions. 2 broken ribs, but no lung damage. Ideally, she should be hospitalized, but he glanced around the cabin. I understand that's not an option." He pulled several blister packs from his kit. "Painkillers safe for pregnancy. Anti-inflammatories. Vitamins. Everything she can take in her condition." He handed the meds to Ashley. "Bed rest for at least a week. No sudden movements." "Thank you, doctor," Ashley whispered. Victor nodded, then motioned Maxwell aside. They spoke in low voices, but I still heard. "This wasn't a random attack," Victor said. "The blows were deliberate. Someone wanted to cause maximum pain, but not kill right away." "To make her suffer," Maxwell said grimly. "Exactly." Victor shook his head. "Brutal, especially considering she's pregnant." "We'll take care of it," Maxwell said firmly. "Thanks for coming." "If her condition worsens, call me right away," Victor said, shaking his hand. "And be careful. I passed your house in town. There were people there. Not locals. Watching." Maxwell and I exchanged glances. So, they were already looking for us. Once the doctor left, Maxwell sat down at the laptop immediately. "We have to move faster," he said. "If they're already at the house, they'll expand the search perimeter soon." "What are you going to do?" I asked, changing the cold compress on Ashley's forehead. "Send the message to Robert," he replied without looking up. "Right now." He worked for about an hour, then showed us the result. It was an email with the photos Ashley had taken, plus the bank statements his contacts had retrieved. The text was concise, direct, outlining the foundation fraud, the secret offshore accounts, the assault on a pregnant woman. "We're not making demands," Maxwell explained. "Just offering a meeting. Today at 6 p.m. Old Mill Cafe downtown." "Why there?" Ashley asked. "That's in the city center." "Exactly," Maxwell nodded. "Public place. He can't make a move against us. And we'll have the advantage. We know what he looks like. He doesn't know us." "He won't come alone," I said. "Men like that never do." "I know," Maxwell smiled faintly. "That's why I'll have my own people. Former comrades. 3 of them, reliable. He sent the message through a secure channel. Now we wait, he said, closing the laptop. The reply came 40 minutes later, short, businesslike. I'll be there at the appointed time and place. Alone. You come without backup. Maxwell smirked. Of course he won't come alone. And neither will we. I should go with you, Ashley said suddenly, trying to sit up. Don't even think about it, I said gently, pushing her back down. You need rest. Mom, this is my fight, she said stubbornly, wincing in pain. I need to be there. This is our fight, Maxwell said firmly. But your job now is to protect yourself and that baby. We'll handle it. Ashley wanted to argue but suddenly turned pale and grabbed her stomach. I panicked, but she shook her head reassuringly. It's okay. He just kicked. See? I smiled softly, stroking her hand. Even the baby's telling you to stay put. By noon, Maxwell was gone again. He had to meet his contacts and finalize the plan. He left me one of the pistols and made me promise not to leave the cabin. If anyone comes close, you shoot, he said before leaving. Don't try to find out who it is. I nodded. In 30 years, I'd never aimed a gun at a person, but I knew I could, if it meant saving my daughter. Ashley and I were alone. She dozed most of the day, drained by pain and stress. I sat by the window, watching the forest and thinking how strange life had become. Just 3 days ago, I'd been an ordinary retiree, a former nurse making jam and knitting socks for her grandkids. And now I was sitting with a gun in my hands, ready to protect my daughter from powerful people who wanted her dead. But maybe I'd never been just a retiree, had I? My grandfather's soldier's blood and my Mexican grandmother's courage had always been in me. I'd simply forgotten, lulled by the quiet of peaceful life. Maxwell returned at dusk, focused, composed, and ready for what came next. Everything's ready, Maxwell said. My people are already inside the cafe, 1 at the bar, 2 at the tables. Robert arrived in town an hour ago. His car's parked outside the Riverside Inn. He's preparing too, I said thoughtfully. He must have his own people. Of course, Maxwell nodded. But in a public place, they'll have to stay careful. Same as us. He handed me a small leather briefcase. All the documents are in here, Ashley's original photos, printed bank statements, data on the shell companies, the money flow chart, and something else, something my friends dug up. What is it? I asked. Proof that Patricia's been living a double life for the past 3 years, Maxwell said with a faint, knowing smile. She's got a lover, a young manager at one of her husband's hotels. Oh my God, I muttered, shaking my head. And she had the nerve to talk about dirty blood. Maxwell checked his watch. It's time, Rachel. The meeting's in an hour and a half, and it'll take nearly that long to get there. I turned to Ashley, who had woken up and was watching us anxiously. We've got this, I told her, kissing her forehead. Everything's going to be fine. Be careful, she whispered. Those people, they don't know how to lose. Neither do we, Maxwell said firmly. Neither do we. We stepped outside. The evening air was cold, a thin fog curling over the lake. Perfect weather for what we were about to do, low visibility, but not enough to be dangerous. In the car, Maxwell checked his gun one last time, then handed me a small box. What's this? I opened it and saw a tiny earpiece. Radio transmitter, he explained. My guys will stay in contact with us. I'll hear them, you'll hear me. If something goes wrong, I'll say the code word sunset. That means, get out immediately. I placed the earpiece in my ear and adjusted my scarf to hide it. And if we need backup? Sunrise, he replied. They'll move in right away. The road to town was empty. We drove in silence, each lost in thought. I kept thinking about my daughter, alone in the forest cabin. She must have been terrified, though she'd never show it. Everything will be fine, Rachel, Maxwell said suddenly, as if reading my mind. We've thought through every detail. The plan's solid. I nodded, though unease kept gnawing at me. Too many unknowns. How would Robert react? Would he believe us? What would he do if he did? The city greeted us with bright store lights and street lamps. After the forest quiet, the hum of traffic felt deafening. Maxwell parked 2 blocks away from the cafe. We'll walk from here, he said. Safer that way. I gripped the briefcase tighter and stepped out. We walked through the evening streets like ordinary passers-by, a middle-aged man and a woman a bit past her prime. No one would have guessed we were on our way to a meeting that could change everything. Old Mill Cafe sat on the ground floor of an old brick building downtown. Cozy, dimly lit, soft music playing. We arrived 15 minutes early. He's already here, Maxwell murmured. Corner table. Alone. but his men are close, 2 tables over. I glanced around discreetly. I recognized Robert instantly. Tall, commanding, with a strong face and silver at his temples. He stirred his coffee absently, calm on the surface, but the whitened knuckles around his cup betrayed tension. "I'll go first," Maxwell said. "You come in a minute later." He walked over confidently. I saw Robert stiffen as the stranger approached. 2 bodyguards nearby leaned forward, but Maxwell just sat down across from him and spoke quietly. I waited a minute, then approached and took a seat beside my brother. "Good evening, Robert," I said evenly. "Thank you for agreeing to meet." He studied me closely. In his cool gray eyes there was no hostility, no warmth, just calculation. "You're claiming my wife tried to kill your daughter," he said flatly. "That's a serious accusation. Do you have proof?" I opened the briefcase, took out the photos of my battered daughter, and laid them in front of him. "This is my daughter, your daughter-in-law. She's carrying your grandchild." His face twitched slightly as he looked at the photos, but he quickly composed himself. "That's terrible," he said in an even tone. "But what makes you believe Patricia did this?" Maxwell took out a recorder and pressed play. Ashley's weak, trembling voice filled the space between us. "Patricia drove me out of town," she said on the recording. "Said she wanted to show me a new property. When we got out of the car, she hit me with something heavy. She kept talking about dirty Mexican blood, that I wasn't worthy of their family." Robert sat motionless, listening. His face gave nothing away, but the tight clench of his jaw told another story. "Motive," he said at last when the recording ended. "What motive would my wife have to attack her daughter-in-law? Patricia can be demanding, yes, but violence?" I placed a second folder on the table. "Your wife has been siphoning money from the Hope Foundation for years. About $180 million. Classic shell company setup." Ashley found the documents by accident and asked the wrong question. Robert opened the folder. His face stayed neutral, but I saw the faint tremor in his hands as he turned the pages. "This can be verified?" he asked, scanning the statements. "We already did," Maxwell said. "Those companies exist only on paper, registered to fake names. The money's been funneled offshore." Robert was silent for a long time, studying the evidence. Then he looked up. "Let's say it's true. What do you want? Money? Compensation?" "Justice," I said firmly. "And safety for my daughter and her unborn child." "What kind of justice?" His voice hardened. "You realize a public scandal would destroy not only Patricia's reputation but the business I've built for 30 years? We're not after publicity," Maxwell said calmly. "All we want is for Ashley to be safe, and for the person who tried to kill her to be held accountable." Robert drummed his fingers thoughtfully on the table. "And Gregory? Does my son know about any of this?" "No," I shook my head. "And Ashley isn't sure he should. She believes he'll always take his mother's side." Something that looked like pain flickered in the eyes of this otherwise unshakable man. "She's right," he said quietly. "My son has always been weak. Patricia made him that way." He fell silent again, lost in thought. Then his gaze snapped back to us, sharp and cold. "You've got more, don't you?" His voice was soft but carried steel. "Otherwise, you wouldn't have dared to meet me like this." Maxwell nodded and pulled out a third folder. "Your wife's living a double life, Robert. She's been having an affair with Derek Thompson, the manager of your Riverside Plaza Hotel, for 3 years now. And part of the foundation's stolen funds were transferred to a joint account they share in Cyprus. It was a low blow, and we knew it. But we had no choice. We needed to hit him where it hurt, to make him stand with us." Robert took the folder with trembling hands. Inside were photos of Patricia and a younger man, at a restaurant, leaving a hotel, in an airport, and bank statements proving the shared account. His face hardened like stone. He closed the folder and set it on the table. "What do you want?" he asked hoarsely. "Specifically." I leaned toward him, meeting his eyes. "An official divorce between Ashley and Gregory, with fair compensation. Full protection for my daughter and her unborn child. And Patricia stays away from them forever. And in return?" Complete silence, Maxwell said evenly. "No police reports. No media. No public accusations. Everything stays between us." Robert studied us for a long moment, as if weighing our resolve. Then he nodded. "I agree. On one condition. I'll deal with Patricia myself, my way." Maxwell and I exchanged glances. "You won't harm her physically?" I asked. Not that I cared much for the woman, but I didn't want more blood on anyone's hands. "No," he shook his head. "But she'll get what she deserves. Believe me, losing her status, her money, and her reputation will hurt Patricia more than any physical punishment." Then we have a deal, Maxwell said, extending his hand. Robert hesitated only a moment before shaking it. Ashley's in a safe place? He asked, gathering the papers into one stack. Yes, I replied. And she'll stay there until this is over. Wise, he nodded. I'll contact you in 3 days. By then, the divorce documents will be ready, and Patricia will no longer be a threat. He stood, gave us a curt nod, and walked toward the door. His bodyguards rose immediately and followed him out. Maxwell and I sat there for a while, hardly believing how smoothly it had gone. Do you think he'll keep his word? I whispered. I do, Maxwell nodded. Men like Robert value their word, it's a matter of honor. And besides, a scandal wouldn't benefit him. Suddenly, exhaustion hit me like a wave. The tension of the past days weighed heavy on my shoulders. Let's head back, Maxwell said, noticing my state. Ashley's waiting for news. We left the cafe and walked to the car. The city around us buzzed with its usual evening life, people hurrying along the sidewalks, store windows glowing, cars sliding through traffic. No one had any idea that the fate of several families had just been decided. In the car, Maxwell contacted his men, confirmed we weren't being followed, and we drove off. You did great, sis, he said once we were out on the highway. Grandpa would be proud of you. And of you, I smiled faintly. I couldn't have done it without you. This was a team victory, he said, focused on the road ahead. Ours and Ashley's. She showed real courage. I looked out the window at the trees rushing by, dark silhouettes against the night sky. Somewhere out there, deep in the forest, my daughter was waiting. And now I could finally tell her it was over. That she was safe. She and the child growing inside her. Mexican blood, I murmured. Patricia despised it so much. But that blood is what defeated her in the end. Not the blood, Maxwell said. What it gave you, strength, wisdom, and the will to protect your own, no matter what. I nodded. He was right. It wasn't about where we came from, it was about what that legacy had taught us, to survive where others give up, to see a way out where others see walls, and to never back down when it comes to the people we love. We drove through the night toward the forest cabin where it had all begun, and I knew that now everything would be all right. Not immediately, not easily, but we would endure, as we always had. A week passed, 7 long days filled with waiting and unease. Ashley and I stayed in the cabin. Maxwell came regularly, bringing food, medicine, and updates. My daughter's condition slowly improved. The bruises faded, the pain in her ribs dulled. She slept a lot, and when awake, she sat by the window, looking at the lake and gently rubbing her belly, as if assuring the baby that everything would be fine. On the 3rd day, just as promised, Robert contacted us. Maxwell met him in town and came back with papers, the divorce agreement, the compensation, and news that made me catch my breath. Patricia's gone, he said, tossing another log into the stove. Officially, she's gone to a clinic in Switzerland for treatment. But that's just a cover. And really? I asked, glancing at the sleeping Ashley. Robert gave her a choice, Maxwell said quietly, so as not to wake his niece. Prison for fraud and attempted murder, or exile. She chose exile. He gave her a modest sum, by his standards, and sent her somewhere in South America, with strict instructions never to return or contact the family again. And her lover? I asked, remembering the young hotel manager. Fired, Maxwell shrugged. Robert's a hard man. He doesn't forgive betrayal. And Gregory? Does he know what really happened? He knows, Maxwell sighed. But not everything. Robert told him his mother committed financial crimes and had to step away. And the attack on Ashley? Not a word, Maxwell said. He's afraid the full truth would break his son. I shook my head. The man who hadn't been able to protect his wife from his own mother now didn't even know the full truth about what had happened. But maybe that was for the best, for everyone. Does he want to see Ashley? I asked. No, Maxwell said, glancing at his sleeping niece. Robert told me Gregory took the news of the divorce surprisingly calmly. It seems he'd already accepted that their marriage was a mistake. I couldn't tell whether to feel relief or sadness. On the one hand, his lack of resistance made the process easier. On the other, the ease with which Gregory let go of his pregnant wife didn't speak well of him. What about the foundation? I asked, remembering what had started it all. Robert took charge himself, Maxwell said. He ordered a full audit, returned the stolen funds, and replaced the entire management. He's trying to contain the reputational damage. On the 4th day, Dr. Harrison came back to check on Ashley. He was pleased with her recovery. The bones were knitting, the bruises were fading, and the baby was developing normally. In another week, she'll be fit to go home, he said as he packed up his kit. But she needs to rest for at least another month. On the 7th day, Maxwell arrived with important news. The papers are signed, he said, handing Ashley a thick folder. The divorce was finalized quickly, thanks to Robert's connections. The compensation has already been transferred to your account, enough to secure a comfortable life for you and your child. Ashley held the folder on her lap, hesitant to open it. That's it? She asked softly. It's over? Almost, Maxwell said, sitting beside her. There's one more thing. Robert wants to see you. My daughter and I exchanged surprised looks. We hadn't expected that. Why? She asked warily. He didn't explain, Maxwell shrugged. Only said it was important, and that it's not a threat. If you agree, he'll come tomorrow. Alone. No bodyguards. Ashley sat in silence for a moment, absently rubbing her belly, a gesture that had become second nature these past few days. All right, she said finally. I'll see him. It's the least I can do after everything he's done for us. Robert arrived the next day, exactly at noon. We heard the sound of an engine outside, and Maxwell went to meet him, leaving Ashley and me inside the cabin. A few minutes later, the door opened, and there he was, a tall, gray-haired man in a simple winter coat. No suit, no guards, none of the polished air of a powerful businessman. Hello, Ashley, he said, standing at the doorway as if unsure whether he had the right to step further. Thank you for agreeing to see me. Ashley nodded and gestured for him to sit. I started to excuse myself to give them privacy, but Robert stopped me. Stay, Rachel. What I have to say concerns you, too. He sat on the bench across from Ashley, folding his hands on his knees. For the first time, I saw not a stern businessman, but a tired man, crushed by betrayal and guilt. I came to apologize, he began, looking directly into Ashley's eyes. For not seeing, not stopping, not protecting. I was blind. Too focused on business to notice what was happening in my own home. Ashley stayed silent, waiting. Patricia was always complicated, he went on. But I never imagined she was capable of such cruelty, especially toward a pregnant woman, toward the mother of my grandchild. His voice trembled on those last words. I suddenly realized that for this stoic man, the thought of becoming a grandfather meant more than anyone could guess. You're not to blame, Robert, Ashley said gently. You couldn't have known. I should have, he said, shaking his head. It was my responsibility. He paused to collect himself before continuing. I didn't come only to apologize. I wanted to ask, if you'll allow me, I'd like to be part of the child's life. To be a grandfather. Ashley's eyebrows rose in surprise. None of us had expected that. I understand how strange that sounds, after everything, he added quickly. And I'll respect your decision if you say no. But I'm 65, and this child might be my only chance to continue the family line. Gregory the First doubt he'll ever be a father again. He's too weak for family life. There was no anger in his voice, just sad acceptance. And I suddenly felt an odd sense of compassion for him. A man who had built an empire to leave behind for his heirs, only to realize his heirs weren't the legacy he'd imagined. Ashley sat quietly for a long time, gazing out the window at the frozen lake. Then she turned to her father-in-law. I won't deprive my child of a grandfather, she said softly. You can see him, or her, whenever you wish. On one condition, Patricia must never appear in our lives again. And Gregory can't pretend to be a loving father just for appearances. Of course, Robert exhaled with relief. Patricia will never return. And as for Gregory, I'll talk to him. He'll have to choose whether be a real father or stay out of it completely. He paused, then reached into his coat pocket and pulled out an envelope. There's something else, he said, handing it to Ashley. Keys to a house in Pine Valley, not far from here. The deed is in your name. Ashley stared at the envelope, puzzled. Why? I thought you'd need a place to live, Robert said simply. It's peaceful, with clean air. Good for the baby. And close enough to the city if you ever need work or school. That's very generous, but Ashley began. Please, Robert interrupted gently. Don't take it as compensation, you've already received that. Take it as a gift for my future grandchild. Ashley hesitated. I understood her doubt. Accepting a gift from someone tied to so much pain wasn't easy. But at the same time, that house could be her refuge, a fresh start for her and her child. All right, she said at last. I'll accept. Thank you. Robert nodded, then, unexpectedly, reached out and lightly touched her belly. Boy or girl? He asked, his voice softer than I'd ever heard it. I don't know yet, Ashley smiled faintly. It'll be a surprise. In our family, we usually have boys, he said thoughtfully. But maybe what did Patricia call it? Mexican blood will change that tradition. There was no mockery in his tone this time, only quiet curiosity. My grandmother was Mexican, I said, deciding to join in. A smart, strong woman. She taught me a lot. I can see that, Robert said, looking at me attentively. That strength passed on to you, and to your daughter. You know, I've always respected people who can stand up for themselves and their family, no matter where they come from. He stood up, making it clear the visit was over. I won't intrude, he said to Ashley. When the baby's born, and you feel ready, just call me. My number's in the papers. Ashley nodded. Thank you for coming, Robert. He headed for the door but stopped on the threshold and turned back. You're a brave woman, Ashley. And you have an extraordinary mother. Take care of each other. With that, he left. A moment later, we heard the sound of his car driving away. Ashley sat holding the envelope with the house keys, her face a strange mix of emotions, relief, confusion, and hope. What do you think? I asked, sitting beside her. I don't know, she shook her head. Everything's so tangled. Just a month ago, I had a perfect life, or at least I thought I did. And now you're going to have a new life, I said, wrapping my arm around her shoulders. And maybe this one will be the real thing. That evening, after Ashley fell asleep, Maxwell and I sat by the fading fire in the stove. Tomorrow we'd leave the cabin and move her into her new home. Our strange, forced adventure was coming to an end. Do you think Robert will keep his word? I asked, watching the flames dance. About Patricia and Gregory? I think so, Maxwell said, turning a mug of tea in his hands. He's an old-school man. For people like him, a promise means everything. And his sudden affection for his future grandchild. It's genuine, Maxwell shrugged. He's not a young man anymore. His business is thriving, but who's he going to pass it on to? His son's weak, his wife betrayed him. That child is his only real hope for legacy. I nodded. He was right. For men like Robert, family and legacy often matter more than money or power, especially when the years start catching up. What about you? I asked my brother. Will you go back to work in the city? Maxwell smiled. Not right away. First, I'll help you two settle in. After that I got an offer from a security firm, bigger and better than the last one. I'll be nearby. And your bachelor lifestyle? I teased. He chuckled, then his tone grew thoughtful. You know, this whole ordeal made me rethink a lot. Family's the most important thing we have. Grandpa always said that. We just didn't always listen. He tossed another log into the stove, and the flames flared up again. Speaking of Grandpa, he said after a pause, remember how he used to say our roots are our strength? I nodded. He'd often repeat that, especially when other kids mocked me for looking too Mexican. He was right, Maxwell said, staring into the fire. If it weren't for what he taught us, his legacy, I don't know how any of this would have turned out. And if it weren't for Grandma's blood, I added. The very thing Patricia called a flaw turned out to be our strength, the ability to survive, protect our own, and find a way when there seems to be none. To Mexican blood, Maxwell said with a playful grin, raising his mug. To Mexican blood, I echoed, smiling. The next morning, we left the cabin. Maxwell helped Ashley into the car while I packed up the few belongings we had. Before getting in, I stepped out onto the frozen lake's shore and gazed at the snow-covered forest. Here, in this quiet wilderness far from the world, we had survived the hardest chapter of our lives. Here my daughter had begun to heal from the wounds inflicted by the woman who was supposed to be her second mother. Here my brother and I remembered our grandfather's lessons and used them to protect our family. And now, we were leaving as survivors, winners, even. I took a deep breath of the cold morning air and walked back to the car. Ahead of us lay a new life, for all of us. The house Robert had given Ashley turned out to be a large wooden cottage on the outskirts of Pine Valley, about 9 miles from the city. 2 stories, spacious rooms, modern finishes, a fireplace in the living room. Secluded enough to feel safe, but not cut off from civilization. It's beautiful here, Ashley said as we helped her settle into the downstairs bedroom. Quiet. Peaceful. For the first time in a long while, serenity flickered in her eyes. She rested her hand on her belly, and I noticed a small bump moving gently beneath her sweater. The baby likes it too, I smiled. Yes, she nodded softly. I think we'll be happy here. Maxwell busied himself setting up the house, checking the security systems, ordering groceries, helping unpack. I made lunch, occasionally glancing out the window at the snow-covered garden. Ordinary, simple tasks. After so many days of fear and tension, they felt like a blessing. That evening, once Ashley had fallen asleep, I stepped out onto the porch. A crisp frost hung in the air, and the sky glittered with stars. Somewhere far away, in another part of the world, Patricia was starting her new life, without money, without status, without family. A fair punishment for everything she had done. And here, in this quiet refuge, my daughter was healing, preparing to become a mother. And I was here beside her, ready to help her through whatever came next. I suddenly remembered my grandmother's favorite saying, "Our roads aren't always straight, but they always lead us home." We had found our home and our strength. 3 months passed. Outside, April was in full bloom, filling the garden with bright spring flowers. The snow had long melted, revealing soil ready for new life. Nature was awakening after the long winter, and so was Ashley. Her physical wounds had healed. The bruises were gone, the bones mended, and her face showed almost no trace of that terrible night. But emotional scars took longer. Some nights I'd wake to her quiet sobs and rush to her room, sit beside her, and stroke her hair until she fell asleep again, just like when she was little. Her pregnancy, though, was going beautifully. Her belly had grown round and full, and each day she spent more time talking to the baby, reading stories, playing music. Those were the moments when the shadows of the past finally left her face. Maxwell had bought a small house 3 miles away, an old ranger's cabin he'd fixed up himself. Now he worked at a large security firm in the regional center but visited us every weekend. We cooked together, took long walks through the woods, made plans for the future. It felt like we were kids again, inseparable, like before. We hadn't heard from Robert all this time. He had kept his word, not intruding, waiting for Ashley to reach out when she was ready. There'd been no news from Gregory either. After the divorce, rumors said Gregory had gone to Europe to start a new life. As for Patricia, no one mentioned her at all, almost as if she had never existed. Life was slowly settling back into place. Ashley started working remotely again. She was a talented financial analyst, and her skills were in demand. I took care of the house and garden, cooked for the two of us. A quiet, steady life, almost like before all the horrors we had endured. One bright April morning, when the sunlight shimmered through the freshly opened leaves, I was working in the garden, planting tomato seedlings in the greenhouse Maxwell had built for me. Ashley sat nearby in a wicker chair with her laptop balanced on her knees. She'd been busy for weeks, focused on some project. Suddenly she gasped, and I turned sharply, thinking something was wrong. But her face showed not pain, only shock. What happened? I hurried toward her, wiping my hands on my apron. "It's from Robert," she said, turning the laptop toward me. "An email. He says he found documents that might interest me, about Gregory." I frowned. The last thing we needed now was anything dragging us back to the past. "What documents? Did he explain?" "No," Ashley shook her head. "He just says it's important, that it could matter for the baby's future. He wants to meet." "And you're going to?" I asked carefully. She absently rubbed her belly, where the little one was already kicking with energy. "I think so," she said finally. "He's been nothing but respectful all this time, never pushed, never intruded. And if it really is something important for the baby." I nodded. Over these months, I'd learned to trust my daughter's instincts. Motherhood had made her stronger and wiser. "When does he want to meet?" "He suggests this Saturday. Here, at our house." She gave a faint smile. "He writes that he'll come alone, but he understands if we'd rather have someone else present." "I'll call Maxwell," I decided. He was planning to come for the weekend anyway. On Saturday, right at noon, a modest silver sedan pulled up to our house. Robert, true to his word, came alone. He looked different from the last time we saw him, healthier, lighter, as if a heavy weight had been lifted from his shoulders. We met him in the living room. Ashley sat wrapped in a blanket despite the warm day, her legs propped up on a small ottoman. Maxwell stood by the fireplace, pretending to examine the framed photos on the shelf, but I knew he was watching Robert's every move. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," Robert said, settling into the chair across from Ashley. "How are you feeling?" "Good," she said, resting her hand on her rounded belly. "The doctor says everything's perfect. 2 months to go." "I'm glad to hear that." He nodded, and I noticed a genuine warmth in his eyes. "You like the house?" "More than like it," Ashley said, glancing around the spacious living room. "Thank you again." He waved a hand dismissively. "No need to thank me." Then he reached into his briefcase and placed a thick blue folder on the coffee table. "I promised not to interfere in your life until you were ready," he began, "and I would have kept that promise if I hadn't come across these documents." "What is it?" Ashley asked, eyeing the folder but not touching it. Medical records, Robert said. Grigory's and Patricia's. Things I didn't even know myself until recently. He opened the folder and pulled out several pages stamped with hospital seals and official marks. When you were pregnant 2 years ago, the first time, he said slowly, choosing his words, and lost the baby, it wasn't an accident. Ashley went pale. I instinctively leaned forward. What was he saying? Patricia was giving you medication, Robert continued, looking her straight in the eye. Abortive drugs. In your tea, in your food. Regularly, for weeks. I heard Maxwell suck in a sharp breath. Ashley froze, her face white as chalk. How do you know? She whispered. I found the pharmacy receipts, he said, pointing to the documents. Prescriptions written under false names. Then I hired a private investigator. He spoke with your former housekeeper. She confirmed that Patricia gave her powders to mix into your meals, said they were vitamins. Ashley covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders trembled. I rushed to her and pulled her into my arms. That's monstrous, Maxwell said quietly. Even for her. Yes, Robert nodded grimly. I was horrified when I found out, and I decided you deserved to know the truth, especially now, with another child on the way. Why? Ashley lifted her tear-streaked face. Why would she do that? Because of the inheritance, he replied. There's a clause in our family trust, and heir gains control of the company only after producing a child of their own. Patricia didn't want Gregory to become independent of her. He paused, then added quietly, and there's more Gregory knew. Those 2 words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Ashley went rigid in my arms. He knew? Maxwell asked, his voice low and incredulous. You mean? Yes. Robert nodded. He knew his mother was poisoning his wife, trying to cause a miscarriage, and he did nothing to stop her. Oh, God, I whispered, holding my daughter tighter. How could he? I told you, he's a weak man, Robert said bitterly. Always has been. But I never imagined his weakness could go that far. I would never. He broke off, and for a moment his stern face twisted in pain. I would never have let that happen if I'd known. Ashley slowly pulled away from my embrace. Her face, wet with tears, turned strangely calm. Thank you for telling me, she said softly. This explains a lot. She stood and walked to the window. Sunlight framed her silhouette, outlining the curve of her belly. She placed both hands over it protectively. I always blamed myself, she said, looking out the window. I thought I'd done something wrong, that I hadn't taken care of myself enough. The doctor said it was stress, exhaustion. But it was her. And him. Robert stood and took a step toward her, but didn't touch her. He kept a respectful distance. I'm sorry, he said quietly. So sorry I couldn't protect you back then. That I didn't see what was happening in my own family. Ashley turned toward him, and in her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in a very long time, anger. Not despair, not fear, but pure, righteous anger. You're not to blame, she said firmly. You didn't know. But they did. She took a deep breath. They knew. Both of them. And now I know, too. She walked over to the table and closed the folder with the documents. What do you plan to do with this information? Robert asked. Nothing, Ashley shook her head. What could I do? There's not enough evidence for a court case. And why bother? She's already been punished. And him? He'll have to live with it for the rest of his life. She placed her hand over her belly again. I'm focusing on the future. On my baby. On our new life. Robert nodded. Something like respect flashed in his eyes. You're a strong woman, Ashley. Stronger than I thought. I have good genes, she said with a faint smile, glancing at me. Mexican blood, remember? I remember, he smiled back. And I'll be proud if that blood runs in my grandchild's veins. It'll bring strength to our family. To my family, Ashley corrected him gently. It's my family now, me, my baby, my mom, my uncle. But you can be part of it, if you want to. He nodded, accepting her terms. There was an expression on his face I'd never seen before, something close to gratitude. I want to, he said simply. After he left, we sat in silence. Ashley returned to her chair, her face thoughtful but calm. How do you feel? Maxwell finally asked. Strangely better, she smiled faintly. It's like something's cleared up, as if the last piece of the puzzle finally fell into place. I knew exactly what she meant. Sometimes the worst thing isn't pain, it's not knowing. Guessing. Blaming yourself. The truth, no matter how painful, sets you free. What do you think about Robert? I asked. Are you really ready to let him be part of the baby's life? Ashley thought for a moment. He's not like them, she said at last. Not like Gregory or Patricia. He has a backbone, honor. Maybe it's old-fashioned, but it's real. She looked at me. And besides, didn't you always tell me not to judge people by their relatives? That everyone's responsible only for their own choices? I nodded. Those were my grandmother's words, ones I'd often repeated to Ashley when she was teased for her Mexican looks. I did, I said softly. And I'm proud you remembered. And anyway, Ashley added, stroking her belly, the baby could use a man around he can look up to. Someone who shows what it means to be strong, but fair. Maxwell cleared his throat. He already has one, he said with mock offense. Me. I'm his uncle, after all. We laughed, and the tension that had hung over us since Robert's visit finally melted away. That evening, after Maxwell left for the city, Ashley and I sat on the porch. The sunset painted the sky in shades of gold and pink, and birds were singing in the garden. The whole scene felt almost unreal after everything we'd been through. You know, Mom, Ashley said suddenly, I've been thinking about baby names. Oh? I turned to her. And? If it's a boy, Nicholas, after great-grandpa, she smiled. And if it's a girl? Carmen, I said, feeling tears rise in my eyes. After your great-grandmother. Carmen, the name of my grandmother, the proud Mexican woman who once ran away from Mexico City for love. The very same woman whose blood Patricia had called dirty. Those are beautiful names, I said, squeezing my daughter's hand. They'd be proud. I want my child to know their roots, Ashley went on. Both sides, the good and the bad, the strength and the weakness. So they can choose what kind of person they'll be. She gazed at the horizon, the golden glow of the sunset reflecting in her eyes. I've been so afraid, Mom. These past months. Afraid I couldn't handle it. That I wouldn't be able to protect the baby from this world. But now I know, I'm not alone. I have you, Uncle Maxwell, even Robert, strangely enough. She rested her hand on her belly. And I have a strength I didn't even know I had. The kind that shows up when you need it most. Mexican blood, I said with a smile. Mexican blood, she echoed. And you know what? I'm not ashamed of it anymore. I'm proud. At that moment, as I looked at my daughter bathed in the light of the setting sun, her hand resting protectively over her belly where a new life was growing, I thought of our family's long story. Of my grandmother, who defied her world for love. Of my grandfather, who taught us to fight back in a world that often mistakes power for justice. Of my brother, who came to our rescue when we needed him most. Of Ashley, who found the courage to begin again after betrayal. And of the child soon to be born, with the blood of warriors and wanderers, scouts and free-spirited Mexicans. With a legacy of strength, resilience, wisdom, and fairness. In their veins would run the blood that others tried to disgrace. But we knew the truth, that blood wasn't dirty. It was golden. On a sunny June morning, I woke to the sound of my phone ringing. It was 5 a.m. My heart skipped a beat. Who could be calling this early? It was Maxwell's voice, tense but excited. Rachel, get ready. Ashley's water broke. I'm on my way. I rushed to my daughter's room. She was sitting on the edge of the bed, pale, her eyes wide. Mom, I think it's time, she whispered. It's early. 2 weeks before the due date. It's all right, sweetheart, I said, trying to sound calm though my own heart was racing. 2 weeks isn't bad. The baby just couldn't wait to meet us. I helped her grab the hospital bag we'd packed in advance and get dressed. 20 minutes later, Maxwell's car pulled up. He was composed and efficient, just as he always was in a crisis. I've already called the hospital, he said, helping Ashley into the car. They're expecting us. Everything's going to be fine. The drive to the city felt endless. Ashley's contractions were 10 minutes apart. She endured the pain with quiet strength, only tightening her grip on my hand when each new wave hit. At the hospital entrance, we were met by an older female doctor with kind eyes and confident movements. First baby? She asked, helping Ashley into a wheelchair. Yes, my daughter answered through gritted teeth. Everything's going to be fine, the doctor said reassuringly. Your mom can come with you to the delivery room, if you want. Ashley looked at me with gratitude, and I nodded. Maxwell stayed behind in the hallway. The last thing I saw before the doors closed was his pale face and his thumbs up. Everything will be fine. The labor was long and grueling, 14 hours of contractions, screams, pain, and tears. I held my daughter's hand, wiped the sweat from her forehead, whispered words of encouragement. Watching her suffer was unbearable, but I knew this was necessary pain, the kind that brings forth life. At 7 p.m., the first cry of a newborn pierced the room. Loud, fierce, alive. It's a girl, announced the nurse, holding up a tiny, blood-smeared bundle. A healthy, strong baby girl. I watched as they laid my granddaughter on Ashley's chest. My daughter, exhausted yet glowing with joy, touched the baby's tiny face with trembling fingers. "Carmen," she whispered. "My little Carmen." In the hallway, waiting for us, wasn't just Maxwell. To my surprise, Robert was there too, with a huge bouquet of white roses and a nervous expression. "Maxwell called me," he said quickly when he saw my surprise. "I hope you don't mind." I shook my head. He had every right to know his granddaughter had been born. "A girl," Maxwell said, hugging me. "What's her name?" "Carmen," I replied, watching Robert's reaction. "After my grandmother." His eyebrows lifted in surprise, then he smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened his usually stern features. "Carmen," he repeated thoughtfully. "Unusual for our family, but beautiful." "Just Carmen," I corrected gently. "Ashley decided to give her her own last name." He paused, then nodded. "I understand, and I approve." Maxwell placed a hand on his shoulder, a gesture that, 3 months earlier, would have been unthinkable. "Congratulations, Grandpa," he said with a grin. "You've got yourself a beautiful granddaughter." 2 days later, Ashley and the baby were discharged. Carmen was tiny, with a tuft of dark hair and warm, golden skin. Her eyes, when she opened them, were astonishingly focused for a newborn, dark and deep, as if she already understood the world she'd entered. Life began to revolve entirely around the little one: sleepless nights, diapers, feedings, the first smiles. Maxwell visited often, bringing gifts, helping with repairs, or sitting for hours beside the crib, telling Carmen stories about faraway places he'd traveled to. Robert came every 2 weeks. He always called ahead, never stayed long. He brought expensive gifts but never tried to impose his will or interfere. Over time, his visits became a natural part of our lives. That summer was unusually hot. In August, when Carmen turned 2 months old, we spent most of our days on the porch. Ashley read books, I knitted tiny socks for my granddaughter, and the baby napped in the shade beneath the apple tree. One afternoon, as we sat there enjoying the quiet, a sleek, unfamiliar car pulled into the driveway. A young man in an expensive suit stepped out. I stiffened. We weren't expecting visitors. Ashley went pale the instant she saw him. "Gregory," she whispered. Instinctively, I moved closer to the stroller. After everything we'd learned about him, his sudden appearance could only mean trouble. He climbed the porch steps and stopped a few feet away. He looked terrible, thinner, with dark circles under his eyes, tense and restless. "Hello, Ashley," he said quietly. "Rachel, what do you want?" I asked bluntly, not wasting time on pleasantries. He winced but didn't argue. "I wanted to see the baby," he said, glancing toward the stroller. "Dad told me I have a daughter." Ashley stood, positioning herself protectively between him and the stroller. "Why?" Her voice was ice. "Why do you care?" "I'm her father." He took a step forward but froze when he saw Ashley's expression. "Father?" She let out a bitter laugh. "A father protects his children. A father doesn't let anyone hurt them. And you? You knew your mother was poisoning me, trying to make me lose our first child, and you did nothing." He turned pale and lowered his head. "I didn't know how to stop her," he whispered. "She always got what she wanted." "You could have," Ashley said, pausing between each word as if each one cost her strength, "warned me, protected me. But you chose her. Like always." He said nothing, and that silence said more than any excuse ever could. "Leave," Ashley said softly. "You don't have a daughter, and Carmen doesn't have a father. It's better that way." "Ashley, please," he lifted tearful eyes to her. "I've changed. I don't even speak to my mother anymore. I've been in therapy. I want to make things right, to be part of my child's life." She looked at him for a long time, studying him, then slowly shook her head. "No, Gregory. It's too late. There's been too much pain. I can't trust you with our daughter, and I won't let her grow up thinking a man like you is someone to look up to." His fists clenched, and for a second I feared he might do something rash. But then his shoulders slumped, and he nodded. "I understand," he said quietly, "but if you ever change your mind, I'll be waiting." He turned and walked to his car. Ashley watched him go, her eyes devoid of hatred or love, only tired detachment. When his car disappeared down the road, she sank into the chair beside me and took my hand. "Did I do the right thing?" she asked softly. "You did what you had to do to protect your child," I said. "No one has the right to judge you for that." In the stroller, Carmen stirred, and Ashley bent over to adjust her blanket. The baby looked up at her mother with wide, dark eyes, eyes as deep and luminous as night. The same eyes my Mexican grandmother once had. You know, Mom, Ashley said thoughtfully, her eyes still fixed on her daughter, I used to think strength was something loud. Heroic acts, bold decisions, big words. She stroked Carmen's tiny hand, and the baby wrapped her little fingers tightly around her mother's. But now I realize that real strength is often quiet. It's in the small, everyday choices. The decision to protect the people you love. The ability to start over when your world feels broken. I looked at my daughter, at her calm, steady face, and pride swelled in my chest. She had survived betrayal, violence, pain, and she'd come out of it stronger, wiser, whole. That's the Mexican blood, I said with a smile, repeating the phrase that had once been an insult but had become our symbol of resilience and strength. Yes, Ashley lifted Carmen in her arms. And now it runs in her, in the new generation, in my daughter, who will never be ashamed of her roots. Autumn arrived quietly, painting the leaves gold and crimson. Carmen was growing fast, becoming more curious and lively each day. At 3 months, she could already hold her head up, follow moving objects with her eyes, and smile whenever someone spoke to her. Her features were starting to take shape, high cheekbones, dark eyes, a determined little chin. More and more often, I saw in her the reflection of my grandmother, whose name she carried. One late September morning, when frost was already glinting on the grass, Robert came to visit. He brought gifts, as always, this time, a hand-carved wooden rocking horse, still far too big for Carmen. She'll grow into it soon, he said, watching Ashley feed the baby with quiet affection. Before you know it, she'll be running around. We sat in the living room, sipping tea with apple pie I'd baked that morning. The conversation was easy, about the weather, winter plans, Carmen's health. Gregory came by, Ashley said suddenly, without looking up from her daughter. Robert tensed. I didn't know, he said after a pause. What did you want? To see Carmen, Ashley answered. I refused. He nodded slowly, accepting her decision. He's my son, he said at last. But I won't ask you to let him into your life. It's your right to decide. Thank you, Ashley said quietly. I appreciate that. She handed the sleeping baby to me, and I carried Carmen to her crib. When I returned, Ashley and Robert were talking seriously. I'm leaving, he said. For Switzerland. The doctors found heart problems. I need surgery. For long? I asked, sitting beside my daughter. I'm not sure, he admitted. A month, maybe more. Depends on how the operation and recovery go. He took a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. I've updated my will, he said, looking straight at Ashley. Carmen is my only heir. All my assets, business, properties, accounts, will go to her after my death. Until she's of age, you'll manage them as her trustee. Ashley's eyebrows shot up in shock. But you have a son. Gregory will receive a fixed allowance, Robert said firmly. Enough to live comfortably, but nothing more. He's proven he can't be trusted with the family legacy. Ashley shook her head. I can't accept that. It's too much. You can, and you will. For the first time since I'd known him, his voice carried the commanding tone of the businessman he once was. This isn't up for debate. I've made my decision. Then his tone softened when he saw her troubled expression. Listen, this isn't charity. It's my choice. I want my life's work to continue, to be carried on by someone who'll honor it. I see in you the strength Gregory never had, and I know you'll raise Carmen to be worthy of that legacy. Ashley was silent for a long time, then slowly nodded. All right, but on one condition. What condition? I want you to come back, safe and healthy. Carmen needs her grandfather. His face softened, and for the first time, I saw genuine tenderness in his eyes. I promise, he said simply. After he left, Ashley and I sat in silence. The setting sun filled the room with golden light. From the nursery came the quiet breathing of a sleeping baby. It's strange how everything turned out, Ashley said thoughtfully. A year ago, I was terrified of these people. I saw them as enemies. And now? Life is unpredictable, I said, taking her hand. And so are people. You can't judge a book by its cover. Your grandmother always said that. Ashley smiled faintly. I miss her so much. I wish she could see her great-granddaughter. She sees her, I said softly, and she's proud of both of you. A faint cry came from the nursery. Ashley rose to go to her daughter, then turned back at the doorway. You know, Mom, I'm grateful for everything that happened. Even the pain, the betrayal, the fear. Without it, I wouldn't be who I am now. And I wouldn't have Carmen. I watched her walk toward her child, tall, confident, her head held high, and thought of the frightened, broken woman I had found in the woods that cold autumn evening. And I knew she was right. Sometimes we have to walk through darkness to find the light. Sometimes pain isn't the end, it's the beginning. And sometimes what others see as our weakness turns out to be our greatest strength. Mexican blood. The blood of survivors, of the steadfast, of those who never give up. Blood that has been persecuted for centuries yet always finds a way to freedom. Blood that others tried to disgrace but that proved stronger than prejudice and hate. That blood runs in my granddaughter's veins. And it will never be dirty. It will be her strength, her inheritance, her pride. And we, Ashley, Maxwell, even Robert and I, will be there to protect her, to guide her, to love her, to make sure she never forgets who she is or where she comes from, to remind her always that in her veins flows the blood of survivors, the blood of victors. If you enjoyed this story, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us create new and inspiring stories every day. Don't miss the next video. It's waiting for you on the main screen. Take care and be happy.